Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first workshop for Networker 2020. As you can see from the topic, we're talking about women in commerce. E-commerce is a space that has been into existence since over a decade now. But e-commerce now, after 10 years, has evolved in a very substantial manner. We have three people who will be doing the next workshop, and it is presented to you by HSBC and Unimart. So before I go into what the panel will help you with today, let me quickly introduce our lovely panelists and the people who will be doing the workshop. We have Shayak Mazumdar with us. Shayak is the founder and CEO of Unimart, which is the first platform in the world to create a complete solution for SMEs seeking to sell globally. Shayak holds an MBA from INSEAD and also has led a cross-border e-commerce across 21 countries for Rocket Internet background. Shayak's experience of having run Rocket Internet ventures in South America, Africa, South Asia, and China gave him a unique experience and exposure to the demands of cross-border e-commerce in various countries. With that, I would love to invite Shayak on stage, and thank you so much for being with us today, Shayak. Moving on, we have the lovely team from HSBC joining us. Anuj Kanwar, who's the transaction banking head at HSBC Commercial Bank. Anuj is skilled in banking skills, global liquidity, and cash management with a demonstrated history of working in the financial service industry. He is a certified treasury professional and a certified international cash manager with over 14 years of experience in banking across sectors and multicultural markets in North America, Asia, and Europe. Welcome, Anuj. It's a pleasure to have you. And ladies and gentlemen, a lot of this conference has been
Hello. So I think Diksha just dropped.
Lost Diksha in between. So let me introduce my fellow colleague, Sohail. Sohail heads the HSBC global integration for us in India. Has about 20 years of experience, and me and him, we work very closely on implementing solutions across various corporates and treasuries around the world, and especially for India. Diksha, over to you. Thank you. I just filled in while the connection was lost.
Sure. And of course, we have our third and final panelist with us today, Sohail. Sohail has over 20 years of experience in banking and financial institutions across multiple functions within retail and wholesale banking. He has been with the HSBC team for almost 16 years and currently heads client integrations for the digital and global liquidity and cash management business. Prior to his current role, he was a sector lead and a specialist for over 7 years for technology, media, and telecom, and the financial institution group of the NBFIs responsible for relationship management and business development. As a part of his stint with HSBC, Sohail has also worked on enabling predictive customer programs through data analytics and was India's project lead for integrating internal systems and processes within the HSBC Bank. So welcome to you, Sohail. And
thanks,
with that,
thanks, Anuj.
Yeah. And with that, that's my cue to leave. Over to all of you to make sure that this panel is a rocking one. Thank you.
Thanks, Diksha. And I'm going to just set the stage here while we have two experts, Sohail and Shayak, to talk about an e-commerce business. But I just want to talk about this perspective about this industry. The e-commerce particularly is going at a CAGR of no less than 20%, give or take. What we are seeing is obviously COVID or pandemic has amplified what we call direct to consumer delivery. But we are in general seeing the e-commerce business is bringing both cost efficiencies as well as an ease of use for both consumer as well as for the customers. Now, this particular session that we have put across for you, or this particular workshop, is to talk about two things. One, when you are setting up your e-commerce business, and more often than not, there is one thing which is most relevant to you, which is obviously a supply chain, that how you're going to source and how you're going to sell. But also at the same time, how do you receive the money? How do you collect the money in a more effective and a more efficient manner? That's one area that we will spend some time on, and talking about how is this possible, what are the tools, what are the options available to you, considering the India tech stack itself has been evolving in the last 2 or 3 years. The second thing which is very unique that we want to talk to you about is, while we also talk about selling on your individual platform, which is your own e-commerce site, but you also often look at a third-party platforms, whether it is Amazon's or Flipkart's, and you look at selling on them. But have you considered, or there are options of selling outside of India? That is, if you're looking to sell on Amazon UK, or if you're looking to sell on Amazon US, for the sake of an example, how would you be able to set up a shop and be ready in next 2 or 3 days, or 1 week or 2 weeks? What will it take for you? And that is why we have Shaikh with us and with Unimart, is that they are making this dream possible to go local to international. And Shaikh, with this, I would first of all ask you to talk about how is this possible, and is it easy, first of all, for somebody to make this setup and go live in no time? And maybe from there we can have this conversation forward. Shaikh, over to you.
Thanks, Anuj. And first of all, before I answer that question, I'm sitting in a room full of illustrious women, and it's very, very, I'm very grateful to Diksha, Anuj, and all of you for giving me this opportunity to speak to all of you. The answer to the question is, of course, no, it's not easy to set up an international business any day, right? It's a problem for big and small, all sizes of businesses. But the thing about big businesses is they have a lot of cash to throw at it. So what they'll typically do is, let's take a P&G or a Unilever as an example. They'll put inventory in every market. They'll put distributors in every market. And if one season doesn't go that well and some stock is lost, it's not that much of a problem for them. But if you talk about small businesses, it's not the same story. How many countries can you really go and incorporate in? In how many countries can you go and set up your business in? It becomes very difficult after a point to sustain that kind of an effort. And I speak from experience because I've been on both sides of the fence. I've run small businesses in Goa. A little bit about me. I started my career in the Indian Navy. I served for 10 years, retired as Lieutenant Commander. I used to be a nuclear biological chemical warfare specialist and a helicopter operator. Had a lot of fun times in doing a lot of those kind of stuff. And then I ran some small businesses in Goa. So on the one hand, I know the problems of running small businesses without a lot of capital. And on the other side, I used to be one of the managing directors heading cross-border e-commerce for a multinational company across 21 countries, where we were helping thousands of SMEs to set up their cross-border e-commerce. So having been on both sides of the fence, I can tell with assurance that it is extremely complicated. And that's my life's mission. That's what I wanted to do. I came and I wanted to try and set up a platform that can help small and medium enterprises to scale globally without having to go through the pains or the efforts that is typically required. What I'll do is I'll share my screen. I prepared a presentation, and I'll try and keep it lively. I'll try and keep it going. And please do drop your questions. 1 second, I'll just share the screen. Suhail, can you see my screen?
Yeah, Shai, loud and clear.
Okay, great. Okay, so just a quick introduction to us, and I promise I won't make this into a sales pitch. The idea essentially is that we help small and medium enterprises to scale globally. We have a lot of stuff in terms of automation, artificial intelligence, that does the cataloging for you or tells you who your competitors are or does the pricing for you or image optimization for you. There's a whole lot of things, and we are integrated, as in automatically integrated, with about 25 e-commerce channels across 100 countries. So that's it about us. Okay, now we come to the main topic, right? So we're trying to understand whether this growth in e-commerce is this coming as an opportunity or a threat for small and medium businesses, because it could be seen as both. With the staggering growth of some very large marketplaces or web stores like Amazon, Walmart, Flipkart, etc., is it coming as a threat for the SMEs? Because in India, for a long time, it has been perceived as a threat. I'm going to differ here a little bit. Look at this graph. Every region on Earth, you look at this is North America, $918 billion in, this is the estimated number this year, $918 billion in e-commerce, with about $176 billion in cross-border e-commerce. But here's the fun part. Come to Asia Pacific, where we are. By the way, this data includes China, Indonesia, and a couple of other large countries. But if you remove the China part, this number will come down to about half. So we are seeing about close to $700 to $800 billion being spent in Asia Pacific. Okay. And that includes Australia, which is a small market, but it also includes India, Indonesia. These are big markets. Okay. And here's the big story. The amount of cross-border e-commerce from Asia Pacific, particularly China, is staggering. China leads the world when it comes to cross-border e-commerce. So out of this $476 billion, roughly about $350 billion is China alone. Now, how much is India? India is only $6 billion. That's it. $6 billion. China 350, India $6 billion. Are we that far behind China? No. There are certain reasons why we are not doing that well. And there are certain things we can do so that we can also scale our businesses with a lot of efficiency. Some of those things will not be in your control. Those things lie at a government level or at a regulatory level. So we'll not break our heads over that, because we have ways around that and we can solve for those at our level, right? We Indians, we are known for a jugaad. Okay, now we'll talk about some challenges and opportunities. We obviously, I'm not talking about the biggest, opportunity and challenge at the same time, COVID, which I'll talk a little later. But think about this. Whenever you're selling global, customs, regulatory issues, you're selling to another country, how do you get your payment back? How do you not lose a lot of money in payments? Because you don't know. You're going to lose from 5 to 7% in payment transactions, unless you know what to do. And duties and taxes, I mean, most of you don't know that in a majority of the countries on earth, you don't need to pay duties and taxes if your product is below $200 in value. Meaning that if you're not doing a consignment shipment, if you're doing one by one, you actually don't need to pay duties and taxes. And this is something almost no one knows, because if you do the declaration properly, you'll not need to do that. Supply chain and logistics. Again, you're going to ship out. Are you going to ship out from India? Is your warehouse going to be in Delhi, and are you going to fulfill in Malaysia or Singapore or UAE or US? Are you going to put your products there and fulfill from there? These are some of the challenges that are facing you, right? Especially if you're selling products. Services, not so much. Some of the opportunities and threats at the same time. The government has come up with very, very good schemes recently. If you look at, we always had MEIS schemes, which is Merchant Export Incentive Schemes, which gives you back. Not only do they not have any taxes on international products, because you're selling globally and you're getting dollars back to the country, they actually have duty drawbacks for you, meaning that they will give you a certain amount of incentive to sell globally. So that incentive can be between 2 to 5%, which is a lot. Because remember, your average margin when you're selling in international markets is about 10 to 15% of your product price. So imagine if you could take it up another 5%, that's a lot of profit. Okay. I'm going to now talk a little bit about B2B versus B2C, because a lot of us, the moment we think about cross-border, we think about B2B. We think that we have to ship out a consignment, or we got to sell a total thing. You can't sell one item at a time. Can you sell this pen from here to US and still get a profit? If this pen was of a certain price, you could. Meaning that the moment a product's price goes beyond $5, $6 to $10, you can sell it globally. Remember, and of course, there are a lot of other maths that goes into it, like the weight of the product should be at a certain proportion to the price. Then only you'll get a profit. Or your shipping methods or your payment methods need to be optimal. Then only you'll get a profit. But the point is that there are categories, there are products that sell very well cross-border B2C. Okay. The cross-border B2C market globally is growing at 17%, but India is growing about 77%. this is a very important thing just for us to understand that the cross-border B2C e-commerce market from India is about 77% CAGR. India domestic market is about 25-27% CAGR, stands at about $35 billion in value now. But when you talk about the international market, that's about $1 trillion. Now, you don't need to look at the whole market. Look at the countries which are, which you would think of first. So you think of, say, UAE, because there's a lot of Indian diaspora there. You think of Singapore, you think of US, and then create lookalike markets. So if US is your target market, a lookalike market would necessarily be Canada, or a lookalike market would necessarily be UK. So start thinking of this and think of the market sizes that are available there. Now, between B2B and B2C, while B2B gives you bulk money and it's good at an early stage of a business, this you have to keep one eye on the B2C part of the business, because B2B, it's a typical margin would be, say, as in 100 rupees in India, you'd sell it for B2B at 28, okay? But in B, 100 rupees, right? So even if you sell 1/4, you still get the same profits of selling in India. So it's faster scalability, lot less investment nowadays needed. You don't need to go and set up a warehouse there. You don't need to go and set up a company there. You can actually sell B2C one item at a time. And it is 100% trackable, higher profitability. So this is what I would recommend. Think of B2B as what gives you money. Think of B2C as what creates your brand and gives you scalability over time. There's a critical differentiation that we need to strike between profitability and scalability. As small businesses, our focus is always on profitability. But I think, and here's my advice, think about scalability while you're thinking about profitability. Certain amount of your investment should go into scaling. Okay, now this is a very, once we start thinking about which regions, we start thinking about which whether to do B2B or B2C, we need to start thinking about which categories of products are we selling. Like I saw, I think somebody from the skincare products in the audience. Now, for you, for example, think about the kind of regulatory hassles you'll face, right? You'll face some sort of issues when the moment you start shipping your product outbound from India. Are you prepared for that? Now, if you're shipping one item at a time, most likely you'll not get checked, unless you're selling to the European market, where you will get checked. But other than the European market, even in the North American market, you're not likely to get checked. So here's a surprising thing. There are certain categories from India which are really, really big. Gems and jewelry is doing about $40 billion. I'm not talking about just e-commerce exports. I'm talking about the overall exports. So these are the retail categories that I have shortlisted. This is my research for the last 4 years. These are growing phenomenally well. Now, I break this up into 4 main categories. First is obviously gems and jewelry, because India is the world's number 2 in this category. But you also need to look at certain other categories. There are categories like, for example, fashion. India is number 4 in the world in fashion. You need to look at handloom and handicrafts. India is number 3 in the world in that category. And very importantly, you should also look at lifestyle industrial categories, which include sports goods, which includes cosmetics, which includes any kind of household equipment. All of these go into the industrial lifestyle categories. These categories will always do well from India. Why? We have a manufacturing advantage. These are not seasonal in nature most of the times. Fashion is seasonal to an extent, but then you can always have, in the southern hemisphere, summer when we have winter here. So your catalog keeps moving, okay? Some of the global regions to target. I shortlisted this for this particular event because I wanted you to know that there are markets other than US which are very, very big. Can you target the Japanese market through Amazon? You can. Can you target the Japanese market through Rakuten? You can. It's a $115 billion market. It's a massive market, about close to 3-4 times the size of the Indian market now. Okay. You have the British market, which is very big. You have the German market, the French. The Italians are relatively smaller, but certain products sell very high. You've got the Canadian market, Mexico, South Korea, Spain. Like I said, think of the markets that you want to target and create lookalike markets of those, and you'll be able to do well. Okay. Now we come to the elephant in the room. The fact is that COVID has accelerated growth. Okay. COVID has brought in about roughly a decade's worth of growth in e-commerce. Okay. Now think about this one thing very clearly. Some of you are seeing data about how much your products are selling, and you're saying, I don't really know whether COVID has really made that much of a change. But what you're looking at is a lagging indicator. When we talk about data, there are two kinds of indicators: leading indicators and lagging indicators. Leading indicators are indicators that tell you what is going to happen in the future. Lagging indicators are indicators that tell you what happened in the past. Your sales data is a lagging indicator. Whatever you did in the past is being reflected in your sales now. But if you look at your buying behavior change, for example, I have a very good friend called Irfan. Now, Irfan is like very finicky about what he buys, the clothes, the shoes, watches. He spends lakhs of rupees every month buying those kind of products. All the time, Irfan used to go to his malls and buy because he wanted to touch, feel, and buy. COVID prevented that. And the last time I met Irfan for some ice cream at about 10 in the night, and Irfan's telling me, you know what, Shaikh, I'm buying all this stuff online and it's better. That surprised me. If someone like Irfan, who's close to 55 years old, who's all his life never thought about, he still can't figure out LinkedIn. And Irfan is buying such a lot of products online. This is a leading indicator. And this is being, my mom is buying online, my friends are buying online. Huge buying shift, behavioral shift. This behavioral shift will then lead to businesses investing in e-commerce. A lot of businesses I'm talking to, I won't name, but all the leading FMCG fashion brands in India, I'm talking to them one way or the other, and I'm seeing that every one of them is investing a lot of money trying to take their business online. That doesn't mean that they want to cannibalize their offline business. Please don't think that. It basically means that they're trying to think, how can I generate extra 30% growth online because everybody's there? This is an opportunity for you. Small businesses will move the fastest during this time. Larger businesses are like, think about large ships at sea. I'm a Navy guy, I think in terms of ships, sorry about that. But a large ship at sea takes a huge turning radius. It has to slow, it takes kilometers to slow down. But a small ship can turn like that, or a small boat can turn like that. That's what you are. You're a small boat, you're fast, you're nimble, you need to think nimble. Evolving tech, right? This is how we think when we think of, how we select technology or how we use technology when it comes to succeeding in e-commerce globally, okay? Targeting your customers, understanding which categories or what products they need, understanding whether my product can actually sell there in terms of regulatory issues, in terms of shipping challenges, in terms of pricing challenges, all those things. Then fixing the value proposition for that particular customer, telling them that, you know what, this product will change your life in this way. And then focusing on the feature set and the user experience. So whenever we are looking at technology, we look at it the same way. Okay. I'm going to talk about a little bit about a few headline topics. As you can see, omnichannel, headless, integrated. Okay. So let's start with omnichannel. Okay. And please, omnichannel means a lot of things to a lot of people. I have a very clear definition for omnichannel. When you're selling your same product, let's say you're selling this mobile phone, okay? You're selling this mobile phone on Amazon, Flipkart, and your retail store, and your focus is on that product on each channel. That is not omnichannel. When you're selling a product on multiple channels of sales separately, that is multi-channel. Omnichannel is when you're focused on the customer and not the product. So the customer is at the center of your existence, okay? So what you think of is you think that, okay, here's Diksha and here's Anuj. These are my two customers for my mobile phone. Diksha loves these kind of mobile phones. So no matter where she buys, whether it's on my store or whether it's Amazon or whether she clicks a QR code on my newspaper ad, it doesn't matter. Wherever Diksha sees my product, I should know that it is Diksha and the price should be the same. The value proposition should be the same and that same mobile should come up. Versus when Anuj sees it, he sees a very different kind of a thing. So true omnichannel is when your retail store and your online stores merge. They merge seamlessly. Okay. You are looking at selling to the same customer and not necessarily the same product. Okay. And whichever channel they're buying from, they should get the same experience. Some examples. Let's say somebody comes to your store, doesn't find the product. Are they going to walk away? They used to. But if your store is also online, the person could place that order and he could deliver it home. Or he could just ask Google that, hey, Google, I want to buy so-and-so. And that order could go to your nearest store and you could do the delivery. As we go bigger and bigger in business, omnichannel becomes more serious. But even for small scale businesses, omnichannel is super important in today's world. Figure out a channel where you're going to sell your products online. Let your customers know that you're available 24/7. They don't need to wait for you to open the shop. Please remember that your customers are super important. Headless.
Shayak, if I may, I think what you brought out is so important, right? Because 5 years back, it was only online and only retail and offline, right? Now, what we're seeing is it's kind of merging into one, right? And they both lean on each other. And what I'm hearing from you is that technology is making that a lot more seamless for a seller.
Yeah, it's super easy now. You can just link your single catalog to multiple stores. You can create a marketing automation behind which will collect the customer's data and alert you that it's the same customer buying on this store and that store. You don't even need an alert. The system can automatically show them the same product also and give them the same experience. And this is not costly anymore, guys. So think about this in these terms, right? So think about the customer first and how you will wow the customer, right? That's important. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about headless now. It might confuse some of you, but for those of you who know e-commerce very well, headless is not new, although it has just come into the market 2-3 years back. Headless means your customer should be able to buy anywhere. Omnichannel means the same experience. Headless doesn't mean that. Headless means that wherever they buy, you put a newspaper ad with a QR code. You show an ad between IPL with a QR code. You pass a leaflet with a QR code. And all of that whenever somebody scans anything anywhere, or whenever somebody sees your ad on another platform and they come, that is called headless, in the meaning that the sale happen wherever, the processing happens in the same backend. The sale could happen on your Google Assistant. The sale could happen on your mobile phone. It could happen wherever, but the backend for you is one. That is called headless commerce. That's why it's headless, meaning there's no head. So head is where the people see you. It's the face of your company. So that could be anywhere. Integrated supply chain. This is something I'm supposed to be an expert in. So I tend to go a little complex in this. I'll try not to. But integrated supply chain is something which is considered to be a global necessity today. Okay. What does it mean? It means that is your shipping, warehousing, sourcing, returns, replenishments integrated with your sale? Are you automatically ordering products when they're getting over or when they come to a particular quantity limit? Is your return automatically coming to your warehouse? Is your warehouse automatically showcasing the inventory on your e-commerce channel? We used to think that only big businesses can do that, but trust you me, this is absolutely doable today for small businesses for peanuts. And it is important because your customer does not want that after he's placed the order, somebody calling him up and saying, sir, where do you stay? Should I deliver it to you, or can you please come and pick it up from my office? Your customer does not want that. I had this exact experience 2 days ago with DTDC. I was supposed to attend an event with Google. Google, posted a certain, material to me which I was supposed to use during that event. DTDC for 3 days couldn't find my house, which is on the main road, and they didn't deliver the product to me. Okay, so for the event, I went empty-handed. This should not happen. And DTDC actually in the end suggested that I come to their office and pick it up because the delivery boy didn't even attempt the delivery. This should not happen. Your warehouse, your delivery, everything should be 100% synchronized. Otherwise, you're going to face this problem. Let's go a little bit more complex. Okay. Use of AI in e-commerce. What can AI do for you? AI can do a whole lot for you today. And AI is not as much of rocket science as it used to be. You upload an image, you do it all the time, right? We take photos all the time, selfies, this, that, and then Google is automatically editing those images for us. So think of e-commerce as the same. Your product image does not need to go to a photo editor anymore for automating. An editor can just remove the background, shine up the foreground, increase the resolution and everything so that your product looks better. That's the most basic use of AI. Let's go a little deeper. How do you decide the price of your product? You typically think my manufacturing cost is 40 rupees. I should put 40 on top and I'm going to sell for 80. What about the money that you're leaving on the table? Maybe the customer wanted to pay 120 rupees for that product. You didn't know that, but the AI does. The AI is collecting data about sales and products all over the market. It knows how much that product should be priced at. So you left 40 rupees on the table. The AI will immediately warn you. You're leaving 40 rupees on the table. Why? Okay. A little deeper. You want to know how much a product will sell. So you look at last year's sales and you say, you know what? I sold 100 items of this, 100 units of this item. I'm probably going to sell 105 this year. No, you may sell 95, you may sell 80. How do you know? It's a continuous trend mapping that AI does. It looks at so many different things and decides that, okay, your product sales will go up and down, up and down. You need to give it that time. You need to give it that data for it to become more and more accurate. So don't expect AI to work on day one. Like any human being that needs to learn, the AI needs to learn on your data. Okay. And there are many other applications of AI, for example, in marketing, for example, in customer tracking. There's this beautiful ad that came out a few days ago where, they, they basically showed the same product, but depending on who's watching, a local shop name came up. I'm not going to talk about which brand this is, but I think you all know which brand this is. It's a great effort that they did, and I promoted that ad myself on my social media pages also. So it helped the SMEs, and you could do the same. You could target it depending on where people are looking at. Your advertisements, etc., can change. So these kind of use of hyperlocal tracking of customers using AI can be done today. So these are all the different kinds of AI that is possible in marketing, in market assessment, in your product management, supply chain, customer engagement, etc. I'm going to run through the next part because one, I'm running out of time. But more importantly, this we all know. I'm talking about COVID and the first, second order effects of COVID. What does this mean? First order effects of COVID essentially refers to how COVID will typically what immediately happens. Second order is what happened as a result of that, and third order is what will happen as a result of that. First order effect is that we immediately saw cross-border sales grew a lot, but it only grew between Western countries, and countries like us, which are emerging countries, kind of shut down. But we also saw that demand moved away from retail to e-commerce a lot. This is first order. Second order, what did we see? We saw that e-commerce today, every single second order is, by the way, what we are in now, because first order got over by around October or so, and as we had expected, second order is now. E-commerce is growing, boom, boom, boom. It's growing really fast. Every single legacy company is investing a lot of money in making sure that their businesses are ready for e-commerce. We're seeing a lot of use of advanced of brands are open. This has happened to find out that the way you've been doing business has changed completely. Because trust me, COVID brought about at least 10 years worth of change. Everything, whether it is domestic or global, customers will expect you to have the same standards. Customer loyalty will be driven by how good your products are and how much services are you providing around that. Your marketing, your supply chain, your e-commerce, everything will get integrated into one. I'll leave it at this. I'll leave something for the questions. Anuj, I'll hand this over to you. And thank you very much.
Shaik, I just have one question before I ask Sohail to talk about domestic e-commerce and how we are what is that evolving there. What is Unimart doing in all of this?
Almost everything that I mentioned in my presentation, we do all of it. So we have a platform for SMEs that kind of enables them to sell globally. You're doing all the things that we mentioned. It's quite easy to use.
So if I have to ask a question, and this is a very basic question, and because we got some of the fellow founders over here, as you rightly mentioned, there's somebody who heads or who leads the cosmetics business, and obviously I could be someone who was talking about the fashion garment also. So considering that, why would somebody come to Unimart is if they are looking to scale internationally? And what is that the first 2 or 3 steps that he or she should be doing, or she largely in this case should be doing before they even think about going international?
Look, today, so long as the products fall in the most basic categories, they'll sell global. That's not the point. It's about learning and growing in terms of your strategies, in terms of how you approach the market. I see that fashion, clothing, accessories, I see gems, jewelry, handloom, handicrafts, I see cosmetics, these categories doing extremely well from India, and a lot of small and medium merchants are doing that. We at Unimart, we are integrated with 10, 15 shipping partners. We are warehouse partners in many geographies. We are integrated with Amazon, eBay, Lazada, Flipkart, and everybody. So you can sell domestically using us. You can use a POS solution for your retail sales, and you can use our international channels to sell globally. So it's one platform through which you can manage everything, and we are fully powered by AI. So, and we don't necessarily, charge for all of these things separately. So you can use the AI to understand who your customers are, what products will sell where, how much. You can try and identify more about your pricing strategies. So a lot of things that typically first time merchants have a very big difficulty with, we've automated all those things, and we've given you guidance mechanisms so that you don't need to wait and watch. You can do it immediately. You can get started.
Good.
And we've got a great team to support as well.
No,
So Shayak, you've just made it so easy for everyone here, right? In terms of if they are looking to go global, if they are looking to go scale up, I think you guys have spent time and you guys have delivered that solution.
Well, it has taken us 4 years to build it. We've been under the radar for 4 years building this technology. It was very, very difficult to integrate 50 plus platforms globally and bring the same level of service everywhere. And it wasn't easy across so many countries, but we managed to do it, and we've got a lot of satisfied customers.
Great, Shayak. Thank you. And I'm pretty sure there would be a lot of people a lot of founders would have an interest to talk about going international. I guess this 30 minutes was not a justice to talk about what you do. We'll interact with you more and hopefully give this a more expanded view of going international. Sohail, coming to you, we obviously first we spoke about taking international, your e-commerce international, and what Shayak was largely talking about, and if I could get from there, is using a third-party platform and selling your product over there, whether it is domestic or international. Now let's flip the coin and say that what if you want to, and a lot of founders would have an aspiration to build their own brand, which first starts with a website. Let's put it this way. Now, if I have to sell on my own website, and largely let's look at catering to domestic and then go international, what are the things according to you are evolving, and how should somebody manage the most critical part, which is received?
I think so. That's a great session, Shayak. Really very well articulated and such an interesting topic. We can just go on and on and on. Now, if you really look at what's really happening around and how we are unfolding, and the whole scheme of things, and the core that I could get out from your whole spiel is that customer experience, and I still remember you talking about headless and the first experience and the second experience and on. Now one very important aspect of this fulfillment, of this experience is the fulfillment aspect, and that's where the bank comes in, and that's where banks would come in to really enable that whole experience. So you've got a great platform, you've got great business model, you've got great commerce happening, be it online, offline, that whole strategy that even Diksha mentioned about O2O, which is offline going online and online going offline, which is the convergence happening between the business models as well. One of the key elements is you've got a great business model, but if you can't really make a seamless payment towards your commerce and towards what you've purchased and sold, actually takes on the whole customer experience. Now this is where the bank comes in, and the bank really works with customers, and all of these developments, which are either enabled through technology or simply put, the whole innovation piece. And this innovation which we are talking about largely gets classified into three themes. One is the business model, innovation around the business model, innovative products, and the client experience. Now, across all these three themes, banks are also equally aligned, and it is also, if the banks want to be in business, and if banks want to really keep growing and keep servicing their customers, they will also have to keep aligning and keep onboarding or enabling these three themes. Now, as part of innovation, I'm just going to talk you through some of these leading use cases that what we've been doing and how HSBC has been enabling these three themes. When we talk about how do I fulfill that whole, or how do I enable that fulfillment for your great business model that you've developed, and the great new product you've launched or the great experience, customer experience that you've promised. And what we've been seeing is it's no more about one size fits all. And banks have clearly adopted to this. They've augmented technology into their business models. A great example that Shaikh took about using AI, that AI would really work about, letting you know how it needs to be done and what needs to be done. And that's exactly the whole piece, where it is no more about I as a bank comes to customers and tells them saying, okay, here's my product and you want to go international and this is how it's going to work. So it's no more about that. Each customer is unique. What makes the customer unique is the tech, largely technology plays a big part into it. Every business is getting technologically enabled, and the technology, the roadmap of the technology journey that customers have been adopting, and at the and I would say each customer is at a different placement in terms of how they are adopting technology. And typically because of this, each customer becomes unique, because your internal infrastructure, your the way you are structured is very different for each customer. That's just setting the stage. And I would like to highlight how we've been working with a lot of customers, just to give you some of the right examples that we've been working with a lot of customers. Is HSBC, the approach that we've been taking during these engagements is a consultative approach. Our approach has been to understand the customer's business model, understand how your technology stack is all stacked up, and then rolling out solutions for you. So it's just not about saying, I've given you a collection solution. A lot of banks offer this, or I've gone ahead and enabled a online payment gateway for you. A lot of banks do it. So how do we really, and this is going to be the future of banks also. The bank needs to come to you with the right solution that not only fits your business model, or not only fits your ask, both in terms of cost as well as the right kind of customer experience, but it's also about setting up the stage which gets aligned in terms of your technology platforms also, which is a very, very critical and important element. Now, how we've been working with the customers, I'm just going to throw a few examples quickly, is on one of the customers, reached out to us, and it's one of the largest e-commerce platforms, saying, okay, we want to do customer refunds. Just imagine, what is a customer experience? Is a customer experience great that if you get your money back, so you've ordered an online commodity, you don't like it, it was a cash on delivery, you say, okay, I want to refund this, the guy comes and picks it up, he goes back. What's the right experience? Do you say, okay, I wait for the payment for another week to 10 days? Or do you say that the right experience was to get the money back within 2 hours? So HSBC was the first bank that went about doing real-time payments for e-commerce refunds a couple of years back, and this still continues to grow. And today we are a leading bank enabling refunds for e-commerce platforms. So the e-commerce had exactly to the point as how we are using technology and how we are enabling technology. Today there are multiple modes of payments that are available. So you can make a payment through a check, through cash, through NEFT, through RTGS, to IMPS, to UPI. There are so many modes, and you're so confused as to how do I go and make a payment to the consumer so that it's the right experience and it's the right enablement for you as well, right? So we at the back end built up a logic, an AI tool which actually switches. So the moment you initiate a refund payment, it switches between IMPS and NEFT, so that your customer gets the right experience, his transaction is never failed, and you don't have to keep reworking, saying, okay, I have initiated a refund through an IMPS settlement, it has got rejected, now let me reinitiate a transaction to a NEFT settlement. So we've been working with a lot of customers to see how we can mold in a lot of products and services to meet the right solutioning requirements. So it's all about customization. It's all about getting the right fit. And we are happy to work with startups. We've got a focused vertical that works with them to ensure that we get the right right set of products and services that we have to go ahead and offer. Another example, another great theme which is happening these days is globalization is, become one of the key growth drivers and great core areas for any business. Now, earlier, probably a decade back, globalization was only part or was an advantage to global organizations like Amazon's and likes of Walmart, Amazon, and I'm sticking to some of these examples, or in e-commerce or global giants. But today, given all these platforms, and thanks to solutions which Shayak is being offered, it's even small and medium enterprises can actually embark on a globalization journey. Now, this is also one of the key focus areas that we've been working with a lot of customers to ensure that we enable them for this global payment. So while Shayak goes and enables you for this global infrastructure, which he's enabling in terms of supply chain, in terms of logistics, in terms of all of these or business operations, to put it simple, financing or handling monies as part of globalization can be very expensive. It can actually work out to be anywhere between 5 to 10%, which can work as a huge cost barrier for you to go global, right? And that's where banks like us, like HSBC, come in, where we are using our global footprint to ensure that we get a mix of solutions in a way and manner that it actually becomes an enabler for you. And to that example which Shayak just mentioned, saying the value proposition of $5 and $10, how do I make sure that even at $5, you don't end up paying 10% as finance charges or the FX charge or the conversion charge? So we get in a lot of solutions with a combination with multiple permutations and combinations across multiple geographies to enable these for you. And we've got multiple such examples where you could use a single account to make payments across multiple currencies, which could be as high as 200 currencies globally through a multi-currency account. And hence, we can structure a lot of things, getting in a lot of permutations and combinations. And omni-channel.
I think that's, I think what you're pointing out is very relevant, right? But
yes.
I just want, I have a question here, right? Unfortunately, sometimes as founders, we think about collection and, payments in the last, right? We always think about, let me get my site up, let me get my marketing out there. But what breaks and makes a business, an e-commerce business, is the financials, right? So, would the team at HSBC also be able to guide a founder step by step, in setting up those, whether a single account, whether multi-currency account, maybe setting up payments based on, this much I need to pay in these many days to a supplier, this much needs to go as a refund to my customer. So what kind of support is available, right? For me as a founder, as a layman who wants to integrate this, but, probably I don't know where to begin.
Absolutely. Today, Diksha, the whole advantage that we get as a bank within HSBC is our global network. That's a very, very big advantage. We've got product specialists who engage with customers. So as I started my conversation saying it's not about selling one product fits all. It's all about getting a gamut of products because each geography is different. Each customer is different. Each transaction is different. An INR based transaction or regulations in India in terms of in and out is very different to regulations in US or in UK or in Singapore or Hong Kong. So we have product specialists who actually work with customers and actually guide them as to how can they actually enable this entire stack for customers across multiple countries through a single connectivity and pipe.
Suhail, you have this thing called OmniCollect, right? Which is very,
Yes.
very, very essential for the SMEs. I think that's a very good thing that you have.
So we wanted to name that product as Omni-channel, but we realized we were already using that, so we changed it to OmniCollect.
So I'll give you a quick brief about what this Omni Collect is all about. Now, one of the big challenges that a lot of customers actually face, especially on global e-commerce sites, and Shayak, as you rightly said, integrating with multiple banks and multiple platforms, the cost of integration, the skill to integrate, multi-integrate becomes a huge challenge for customers. This is something which we launched last year. We are the only bank in India and across a lot of geographies globally that offers a Omni Collect solution. To put it very simple, it's a single pipe where you have the whole digital stack or the technology stack enabled with a bank, and with the bank enables a whole host of payments and collections at the back end for you. And it just simplifies everything, the way you transact and the way you make things happen. So I'm just going to leave it over there. We can definitely catch up for a deeper discussion.
I have two things to add here, Sohail. Thank you. So one of the things from an Omni Collect perspective, it is a one single window that helps you collect money, whether it is through any electronic mode, credit card, debit card, UPI, wallet, or even to an extent somebody has an option of buy now, pay later. That's one. Secondly, it also helps you with the reconciliation, whether the money is getting credited through a payment gateway or through a direct credit in the account. So it goes beyond just a payment gateway. It is an end-to-end reconciliation solution, especially somebody should keep in mind when you're looking to reconcile and do scale up, because you need to know who has paid the money. And today the systems are so sophisticated that you want to identify the payer on the fly. That also feeds the data back to when you're looking to do refunds, because that is what the must have somebody should have from a customer experience. Now, Deeksha, to your point, I just want to chime in for a second, saying that whenever as a founder somebody is looking to do an integration, we always look at this is a good website and I want to I just want to replicate that. Now, how many of us have seen what was the Uber experience 5 years back and what is an Uber experience now? To get to that Uber experience, somebody needs to invest time and somebody needs to invest money into it. Now, similar is the case when you look at getting the same analogy for setting up your banking. You can always start small. So we have startups who currently use a simple solution like even sending a payment link when somebody is buying over there, rather than doing a whole complex, creating a whole animal by themselves and doing a whole complex integration. So it could be a very small. So it's a PR and a media company, and usually people will go there for small job work, which is for 2,000 rupees or 4,000 or 5,000 rupees. So rather than creating a whole new website and creating all the bills and vessels around with it, they simply send a payment link and their work is done with the complete reconciliation. Now, I'm just saying there are few things that somebody can look at doing it in a small way, and then there are complex setups which are always available. Now, the similar example that we have seen across is when you are looking at an e-commerce which is in a subscription model. Now, there are a lot of grooming kits in a box available. There are fashion garments in the box available. So the subscription model is not only based on the SaaS now, it has moved away from SaaS to D2C or direct to customers. Now, one of the key challenges, if you look at a subscription business, is how do you collect the money? Now, how do you collect the money in a recurring manner without spending too much time in chasing that whether this money has come to my account or not? Now, ideal way was you set up a card, you take the card on file, and you keep on debiting the card on a specific day. Whereas a lot of customers are not comfortable doing that. And this was one of the biggest limitations of introducing an offline mode like ECH, and then NACH came. However, the recent launch of UPI 2.0 is a blessing in disguise, because with the UPI 2.0, and some of us would already know that it's a one-time authorization, and up till 1,000 rupees, you can automatically debit this account on a recurring basis. It's a no-brainer. Everybody is using UPI. The growth of UPI is much more than cards put together or any other wallets put together. So these are technologies that somebody should use when you're looking at to collect money in a more effectively and efficient way. And yet, they're very simple to set up.
Anuj, I think you've given us so much of food for thought, and so for you, Sohail. Now, if as a founder, I want to get in touch with HSBC or with Immunimart, how can I do that? Because I know we have some stellar founders out here who are building e-commerce businesses to scale up. So if you could just help them with that.
Sure. So we are on LinkedIn. I'm going to drop in my email address and Sohail's email address, and my team is also here. I and Shaikh would also do the same. Happy to interact, or they can come through you, Diksha. You know as well, so we can you can help us with the introduction. We can take the discussion forward.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I saw Diksha, you're super popular on LinkedIn. Your post has gone viral.
Well, when you need to bring about a change and when you have such great founders backing you and people like you, I think that's a team effort. So thank you, everyone. Shayak, your insights were absolutely magnificent. Anuj and Sohail, you've helped us decode one of the toughest parts, right, in terms of payments. And you've also shown to us that sometimes as startups, we might think that these bigger companies are not meant for us. But that's the disconnect, right? Because everyone who's listening today, I do want to let you know that this Women in Commerce initiative that has been launched in collaboration with Collaborator and HSBC is exactly pointed towards that, right? We want to build a platform to help women founders access or scale up their businesses, and HSBC is here to support them in every scale up journey of theirs. So with that, let me, thank everyone here and wishing everyone all the best and see you on the next panels too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shaikh. Sohail, thank you. Thanks, Diksha.
Thank you. Thanks, Diksha.
Thanks,
Thanks, Shaikh.